She disappeared for 5 days without a trace. No calls, no messages, no explanation. And when she finally came back, she smiled. "Be grateful I came back." That was the moment Caleb Foster realized he hadn't lost his wife. He had never truly had her. The apartment still smelled like her perfume. Caleb noticed it the moment he stepped inside. Jasmine with something sharper underneath. It clung to the air like a memory that refused to fade, even after 5 days of silence. 5 days. That was how long Vanessa had been gone. No note, no warning, just gone. At first, Caleb thought it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she needed space. Maybe. But by the second night, the maybe started to rot. By the third, he stopped sleeping. By the fourth, he stopped calling. Now, on the 5th day, he just stood there in the middle of their living room, staring at the skyline of Manhattan through floor-to-ceiling glass windows, wondering when exactly his life had turned into something he no longer recognized. His phone buzzed on the marble counter. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Foster?" A female voice said. "This is Detective Harris. We've reviewed the missing person report. I'd like to withdraw it." Silence. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "She's not missing." Caleb's voice was steady. Too steady. "She left." "You're certain?" "I'm certain." He hung up before she could finish. The truth was, he didn't know. But something inside him had shifted overnight. A quiet, irreversible realization. Vanessa hadn't been taken. She had chosen to disappear. And that meant she could choose not to come back. Caleb exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. He hadn't shaved in days. His reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, tired, hollow, waiting for something that might never return. Then, the door clicked. Caleb froze. A soft sound, familiar, intimate, the kind of sound you only notice when you've been waiting for it. Slowly, he turned. And there she was. Vanessa Foster stood in the doorway like nothing had happened. Perfectly dressed, hair flawless, lips curved in that same effortless, practiced smile that used to make people trust her instantly. She set her bag down casually, slipping off her heels like she had just returned from a normal workday. "Hey," she said. Just that. "Hey." Caleb didn't move, didn't speak, he just watched her. 5 days, and this was how she came back. No apology, no explanation, nothing. Vanessa glanced at him, tilting her head slightly. "What?" she asked, almost amused. Caleb finally found his voice. "Where were you?" Simple question. Reasonable. Deserved. But Vanessa didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked past him, close enough for him to catch that same jasmine scent, and headed straight for the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water, slow and deliberate, as if his question wasn't worth rushing for. Caleb turned to face her, something tight coiling in his chest. "I asked you something." She took a sip, then looked at him, and smiled. Not warmly, not apologetically, but with something colder, sharper. "Be grateful I came back." The words landed softly, but they hit like a bullet. Caleb blinked. For a second, he thought he had misheard. "What?" Vanessa leaned against the counter, completely at ease. "I said," she repeated, her tone light, almost playful, "you should be grateful I came back." There was no anger in her voice, no guilt, just certainty. As if she truly believed it. As if her return was a favor. Something inside Caleb cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, internal shift, like a foundation giving way beneath the surface. He stared at her. Really stared. And for the first time in a long time, he saw her clearly. Not the woman he married. Not the version he had loved. But someone else. Someone distant. Someone who had already left long before those 5 days. "Grateful," he repeated slowly. Vanessa shrugged. "You filed a missing person report, didn't you?" she said. "You were worried. Now I'm here. Problem solved." Caleb let out a short, hollow laugh. "Problem solved." "Exactly." She set her glass down. "So can we not make this into something dramatic? I'm exhausted. Something dramatic." 5 days gone, and he was the one being dramatic. Caleb nodded once. Slowly. "Right," he said. Of course. Vanessa smiled, satisfied, as if the conversation was over. As if she had already won. She picked up her bag and headed toward the bedroom. I'm going to shower, she said casually. We can talk later if you still feel emotional. The bedroom door closed behind her. And just like that, she was gone again. Caleb stood there, unmoving. The silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt heavier, sharper, more honest. He walked to the counter, staring at the glass she had used. A faint lipstick mark remained on the rim, evidence of her presence, as fragile and temporary as everything else. 5 days. And all she had brought back with her was distance. Caleb exhaled slowly, his gaze hardening. Be grateful I came back. He repeated the words under his breath, then shook his head. No. That wasn't right. Not anymore. For the first time since she walked through that door, Caleb didn't feel relief, he felt something else, something colder. Something clearer. And far more dangerous. The shower was still running. Caleb sat alone in the living room, the faint echo of water hitting tile bleeding through the walls like a distant storm that refused to pass. He hadn't moved much since Vanessa disappeared behind the bedroom door. Only small shifts, his fingers tightening, loosening, tightening again against the edge of the marble counter. 5 days of silence. And this was what came after. Steam began to creep beneath the bedroom door, curling into the hallway like something alive. The scent of her shampoo followed, clean, floral, familiar. Too familiar. It made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't quite explain. Because nothing about this felt familiar anymore. Caleb pushed himself up slowly and walked toward the bedroom. Each step felt deliberate, controlled, like he was approaching something fragile or dangerous. The door wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. Vanessa had nothing to hide. Or at least, she didn't think she did. He stepped inside. The room looked untouched. The bed perfectly made, her side exactly as she had left it 5 days ago. No signs of urgency. No signs of departure, just absence. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, steam spilling out into the dim light of the bedroom. Through the narrow gap, Caleb could see her silhouette behind the frosted glass, blurred, indistinct, moving with calm, unhurried precision. Like she had all the time in the world, like 5 days meant nothing. Caleb leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes fixed on that blurred outline. You're really not going to say anything, are you? He called out. The water didn't stop. For a moment, he thought she might ignore him completely. Then, I already did. Her voice came through the steam, muffled but steady. Caleb let out a quiet, humorless laugh. That wasn't an explanation. It was enough. The simplicity of her answer made something twist inside him. Enough, for who? For you? He asked. There was a pause. Then the water shut off. Silence. Heavy. Waiting. The bathroom door opened a few inches more, and Vanessa stepped out, wrapped in a white towel, her damp hair falling loosely over her shoulders. Her skin glowed from the heat, untouched by stress, untouched by consequence. She looked at peace. That was the part Caleb couldn't understand. You're still standing there, she said, glancing at him briefly before walking toward the dresser. I'm trying to figure out if this is real, Caleb replied. Vanessa opened a drawer, pulling out a silk robe as if they were discussing something trivial, like dinner plans. It is, she said simply. You disappear for 5 days, he continued, his voice tightening slightly despite his effort to stay calm, and come back like you went on a weekend trip. She slipped the robe on, tying it loosely around her waist. Would you prefer I made a scene? She asked, turning to face him. Cry. Apologize. Would that make you feel better? Caleb stared at her. You think this is about making me feel better? Vanessa tilted her head slightly, studying him. I think, she said slowly, you're reacting exactly how I expected you to. Something in her tone, measured, almost analytical, sent a chill through him. Which is? Emotional, confused, a little desperate. She shrugged lightly. It's not surprising. The words landed clean, precise, like she had rehearsed them. Caleb took a step closer. Do you hear yourself right now? Perfectly. No, you don't, he said, shaking his head. Because if you did, you'd realize how insane this sounds. Vanessa didn't flinch. If I had told you I needed space, you would have asked questions, she said calmly. If I gave you answers, you would have analyzed them. If I stayed, you would have watched me. Her eyes met his. So I left. Caleb blinked. That's your justification? It's not a justification, she corrected. It's a decision. There it was again. That word, decision. Not a mistake. Not an accident. A choice. You don't just vanish on your husband for 5 days and call it a decision, Caleb said, his voice dropping lower now, steadier, but more dangerous. Vanessa stepped closer, closing the distance between them without hesitation. I just did. Silence stretched between them. Caleb could hear his own heartbeat now, slow, controlled, but louder than it should have been. Were you alone? He asked suddenly. Vanessa didn't answer, her gaze shifted slightly, not away, but not directly at him either. A fraction of a second, that was all it took. Caleb felt it. That small, almost imperceptible shift, and it told him everything. He exhaled slowly. Right, he murmured. Of course. Vanessa's expression hardened just slightly. Don't do that. Do what? Jump to conclusions. Caleb let out another quiet laugh. I don't think I need to jump, he said, you're practically handing them to me. Her jaw tightened. For someone who doesn't know anything, you're very confident. I know enough. Vanessa crossed her arms, watching him now with a sharper edge. Then say it, she challenged. Say what you think happened. Caleb held her gaze. For a moment, the words sat right there, on the edge of his tongue. But he didn't say them. Not yet. Instead, he shook his head. No. Vanessa frowned slightly. No. I'm not playing this game, he said. Not on your terms. Something flickered in her eyes then, brief, unexpected. You don't get to disappear, come back, and dictate how this conversation goes, Caleb continued. You don't get to control the narrative anymore. Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. Anymore, she repeated softly. Caleb didn't respond, but the silence said enough. For the first time since she walked through that door, something shifted. Not in him, in her. It was subtle, a crack beneath the surface. You're overreacting, she said finally, though her voice had lost a fraction of its earlier ease. Am I? Yes. Caleb nodded slowly. Then explain it to me, he said, make me understand why disappearing for 5 days without a word is normal. Convince me. Vanessa hesitated, just for a second. But it was there. And Caleb saw it. I don't know you every detail of my life, she said. No, he agreed quietly. But you owe me basic respect. Her eyes hardened again. And you think I haven't given you that. Caleb looked at her, really looked, at the woman standing in front of him. Confident, controlled, untouchable, and completely unreachable. I think, he said slowly, you stopped a long time ago. The words hung in the air between them. Vanessa didn't respond, didn't argue, didn't deny it. She just turned away, walking toward the bed, picking up her phone like the conversation had already lost its importance. Like he had. Caleb stood there, watching her. And in that moment, he understood something with terrifying clarity. This wasn't about where she had been. It wasn't even about who she had been with. It was about something worse. Something deeper. She didn't think she had done anything wrong. And that was the real problem. Caleb's expression slowly hardened. Vanessa. She didn't look up. What? He took a breath, measured, controlled. But beneath it, something darker was beginning to take shape. We're not done talking. Vanessa scrolled through her phone, completely unfazed. We are for tonight. Caleb stared at her, and for the first time, he didn't feel the urge to argue, didn't feel the need to chase answers, because something inside him had already started changing, quietly, irreversibly. Okay, he said. Vanessa glanced up, surprised by the lack of resistance. Okay. Caleb nodded once. Yeah, he said calmly, we'll talk later. There was something in his tone now, something new, flat, controlled, unreadable. Vanessa studied him for a moment, as if trying to understand what had just shifted, but she said nothing, and neither did he. Because for the first time, Caleb wasn't looking for answers anymore, he was starting to look for the truth. And deep down, he already knew it was going to destroy everything. It didn't happen all at once. The clarity, it came slowly, quietly, like fog lifting off a city that had always been there, just hidden beneath illusion. Caleb didn't confront her the next morning. He didn't ask where she had been, didn't bring up the 5 days, didn't even look at her the way he used to. Instead, he watched, and more importantly, he remembered. Vanessa stood in front of the mirror, fastening a pair of gold earrings, her reflection flawless under the soft morning light. She looked exactly like she always did, composed, elegant, untouchable. "Do you have meetings today?" she asked casually, as if nothing had fractured between them. Caleb adjusted his cufflinks. "A few." She nodded, barely paying attention, already focused on her phone again. Always the phone. It hadn't meant anything before, now, it meant everything. "You'll be late?" she asked. "Probably." "Good," she said absently. "I might be out too." Caleb paused. "Work?" Vanessa didn't look up. "Something like that. Something like that." The words echoed long after she left the room.
By the time Caleb arrived at his office in Midtown, the city had already swallowed him whole. Honking traffic, rushing pedestrians, the constant hum of ambition and distraction. Normally, work grounded him. Today, it felt distant, muted. His assistant, Rachel, handed him a folder as soon as he stepped in. "You've got a call with the Denver client at 10, she said. "And, are you okay?" Caleb blinked, pulled back into the moment. "Why wouldn't I be?" She hesitated. "You just look tired." He offered a faint smile. "Didn't sleep much." Rachel nodded, though her concern lingered. "Let me know if you need anything." Caleb stepped into his office, closing the door behind him. Silence. Finally. He set the folder down, but didn't open it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. And that's when the memories started coming. Late nights.
At first, they had seemed normal. Vanessa worked in PR, events, clients, last-minute crises. It made sense that she would come home late sometimes. Then sometimes became often, then often became expected. "I told you, it's a launch event," she had said one night, slipping off her heels at 2 a.m. Caleb had been sitting on the couch, waiting. "You could have texted." "I did." "No, you didn't." Vanessa had frowned, checking her phone. "Oh. I thought I did. A small thing. Forgettable. At least, it had been."
Now, it felt deliberate. Secretive texts. That was harder to ignore. She used to leave her phone anywhere, on the counter, on the couch, beside him in bed. Then, gradually, that changed. Screen always facing down. Notifications muted. Smiles that didn't reach her eyes when she read something. "Who's that?" Caleb had asked once. "Work. Work makes you smile like that?" Vanessa had laughed lightly. "You're overthinking." Maybe he had been. Back then. And then there was the distance. Not physical. Something worse. Emotional absence. She was there, but not really there. Conversations became shorter. Touches became rarer. Even silence felt different, less comfortable, more empty. Like sharing space with someone who had already left. Caleb opened his eyes slowly. His office came back into focus, but it felt different now. Sharper. Colder. Because now, he wasn't remembering randomly. He was connecting. Patterns. Clear. Undeniable. And suddenly, everything made sense. His phone buzzed. A message. "Vanessa, don't wait up tonight." Caleb stared at the screen. No explanation. No context. Just expectation. Like she assumed he wouldn't question it. Like she assumed he still played the same role. The waiting husband. The one who believed. The one who stayed. Caleb typed a response. "Okay." He hit send. Then set the phone down carefully. Too carefully. By noon, he had made a decision. Not emotional. Not impulsive. Calculated. Quiet. He wasn't going to confront her again. Not yet. Because confrontation required truth. And right now, he only had suspicion. But not for long. That evening, Caleb didn't go home right away. Instead, he sat in his car across the street from their apartment building. The engine off, the city alive around him. People passing by, unaware that someone's life was quietly unraveling just feet away. He checked the time. 7:42 p.m. Vanessa had said she'd be out. So, he waited. Not angrily, not desperately, just patiently. like someone who had finally decided to see things as they were. 8:15 p.m. Nothing. 8:47 p.m. Still nothing. At 9:03, a black car pulled up to the curb. Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. Not a taxi, not a rideshare, private. The driver stepped out, opening the back door. And then, Vanessa. She stepped out slowly, adjusting her coat, her expression relaxed, almost satisfied. Caleb's grip tightened on the steering wheel, but he didn't move, didn't react. He just watched, because this was what he needed. Truth, raw, unfiltered. Vanessa leaned slightly toward the car window, saying something to whoever was inside. Her posture softened, different from how she stood with him. More intimate, more real. Caleb couldn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. The driver closed the door. The car pulled away. Vanessa turned and walked toward the building without hesitation. No glance back, no pause. Like whatever, or whoever, was inside that car, was already secured, already certain. Caleb exhaled slowly. His chest felt tight, but his mind was clear. Too clear. Because now, it wasn't just a feeling. It wasn't just doubt. It was something else. Something solid. Something undeniable. He didn't follow her inside. Not immediately. Instead, he sat there for a few more minutes, letting the reality settle in. Letting it sink deep enough that it wouldn't be shaken later by excuses or lies. Then, finally, he stepped out of the car. When he entered the apartment, Vanessa was already inside, her heels by the door, her coat draped carelessly over the chair. "Hey," she called out casually. "You're back late." Caleb closed the door behind him. "Yeah." She walked into the living room, glancing at him. "How was work?" "Fine." "A beat. And yours?" he asked. Vanessa smiled faintly. "Busy." "Busy." Caleb nodded. "Of course." She studied him for a moment. There was something different now, subtle, but there. "You okay?" she asked. Caleb met her eyes. And for the first time, he didn't try to hide anything. "I'm starting to be," he said. Vanessa frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" Caleb held her gaze. "It means," he said calmly, "I think I've been missing something for a long time." The air between them shifted. Vanessa's expression tightened, just barely. But Caleb saw it, and this time, he didn't look away. That night, as Vanessa slept beside him, her breathing soft and even, Caleb lay awake staring at the ceiling. Not restless, not broken, just aware. Because now, he wasn't guessing anymore. He wasn't imagining things. He was seeing. And once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. Caleb turned his head slightly, looking at Vanessa in the dim light. She looked peaceful, untouched by consequence, untouched by truth. For now, his expression hardened, just slightly. Because deep down, he knew this was only the beginning, and whatever came next was going to change everything. The name came quietly, not from confrontation, not from confession, but from a thread Caleb almost missed. It started with a receipt, crinkled, folded twice, left carelessly in the inside pocket of Vanessa's coat, the same coat she had worn the night he watched her step out of that black car. Caleb hadn't meant to look. At least, that's what he told himself. He was just moving it, clearing space, maintaining normalcy, playing the role she still believed in. But then his fingers brushed against paper, and something in him paused. He unfolded it slowly. A private members club in Soho. Time stamp, 11:38 p.m. 2 glasses of wine. 1 signature entree. 1 dessert. Table for 2. Caleb stared at the numbers. Then at the date. 2 nights before she disappeared. He didn't confront her. Not anymore. That instinct, the need to demand, to understand, to be reassured, was fading. In its place, something colder was growing. Something patient. The next day, Caleb didn't go to the office. Instead, he sat at a quiet cafe across from the club listed on the receipt. Early morning, sparse crowd, the kind of place where no one asked questions. He watched the entrance. People came and went, well-dressed, confident, discreet. This wasn't just a restaurant, it was a place for people who had things to hide, and the means to protect them.
Caleb checked his watch. 9:12 a.m. Too early for anything useful. Still, he stayed. Because this wasn't about catching her in the act anymore. This was about understanding the shape of the truth.
By midday, he walked inside. The interior was dim, elegant, controlled. Soft jazz played under low conversation. A hostess greeted him with a practiced smile. Reservation? No, Caleb replied calmly. I'm actually looking for someone. Her smile didn't fade, but it sharpened. I'm sorry, we can't give out information about our guests. I understand, Caleb said, but maybe you can confirm something. A pause. Professional. Measured. He slid the receipt across the counter. The hostess glanced at it briefly, then looked back at him. Sir, I'm not asking who she was with, Caleb interrupted gently. I just want to know if she was a regular. The hostess hesitated. And that hesitation was enough. She's been here before, Caleb said quietly. Not a question, a statement. The hostess didn't respond, but she didn't deny it either. That was all he needed. The name came later, through Rachel, unintentionally, which made it worse. You know who booked the Westbridge project? Rachel asked casually, flipping through files in his office that afternoon. Caleb barely looked up. No, Julian Cross, she said. Big name. Real estate, private equity, politics, you name it. Something in the air shifted. Not visibly, but internally, it clicked. Caleb's pen stilled. Cross. He repeated. Yeah, Rachel nodded. You've definitely heard of him. Caleb hadn't. Not until now, but suddenly, the name felt familiar. Not in memory, in instinct. That night, while Vanessa slept, Caleb sat in the living room with his laptop open, the glow of the screen casting shadows across his face. Search results filled the page. Julian Cross. Photos. Articles. Interviews. A man in his early 40s, sharp features, controlled smile, the kind of presence that didn't demand attention but expected it. Power didn't need to announce itself, it just existed. Caleb scrolled slowly. Investment firms. Political ties. Charity galas. Private events. And then, a photo. Not of Julian. Of Vanessa. Caleb froze. It was from 6 months ago. A gala. She stood in a black dress he remembered clearly because he hadn't been invited. She had said it was client only. But there she was. Smiling. Looking directly at the camera. And beside her, Julian Cross. Not touching. Not overtly close. But close enough. The kind of proximity that meant something. The kind of distance that said everything. Caleb leaned back in his chair. His chest didn't tighten this time. Didn't collapse. It settled. Because now, this wasn't suspicion anymore. It was structure, a pattern with a name, a life with a face. He replayed everything. The late nights, the distance, the 5 days, the car, the receipt, and now, Julian Cross. It wasn't just an affair. Affairs were messy, emotional, unstable. This was organized, intentional, sustained. Vanessa hadn't been slipping. She had been balancing 2 lives, and she had done it well, too well. The next morning, Caleb watched her differently. Not with hurt, not with confusion, but with understanding. She moved through the apartment with ease, sipping her coffee, checking her phone, existing in a reality she believed was still intact. You're quiet lately, she said, glancing at him. Caleb nodded slightly. Just thinking. About. He met her eyes. Everything. Vanessa studied him for a moment. Searching. But not deeply enough. Try not to overthink, she said lightly. It doesn't suit you. Caleb almost smiled. Almost. Later that day, he followed her. Not closely, not recklessly, just enough. She didn't notice. Of course she didn't. Because in her mind, he wasn't someone who would. She entered a building on the Upper East Side. Private, discreet, no signage. Caleb stayed across the street, watching. Minutes passed. Then, a familiar car pulled up. The same one, black, polished, silent. The driver stepped out, opened the door, and Julian Cross stepped onto the sidewalk. Caleb recognized him instantly. Not from memory, but from certainty. Julian didn't rush, didn't hesitate. He walked inside like he belonged there, like everything inside already belonged to him. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly, but his expression remained calm. Because this This was the confirmation. Not emotional, not debatable, real. Hours later, Vanessa returned home like nothing had happened. Like she always did. "Long day," she said, kicking off her heels. Caleb nodded from the couch. "Yeah," he replied. She glanced at him. "You okay?" Caleb met her gaze. And for a brief moment, something passed between them. Something unspoken. Something dangerous. "I understand things better now," he said. Vanessa frowned slightly. "What things?" Caleb held her eyes, then shook his head. "Nothing," he said calmly. "Just work." She watched him for a second longer, then looked away, dismissed it, like she always did. That night, as the city lights flickered through the windows, Caleb stood alone in the living room once again. But this time, he wasn't waiting. He wasn't hoping. He wasn't questioning. Because now, he knew. Vanessa hadn't just betrayed him. She had replaced him. Not emotionally, not temporarily, but structurally. In her life, he was no longer central. He was optional. Caleb exhaled slowly, his reflection staring back at him in the glass. For the first time since she walked back into that apartment, he understood his place. And more importantly, he understood something else. He had been fighting for a marriage that no longer existed. And the most painful realization of all, it wasn't that she chose someone else. It was that she had stopped choosing him a long time ago. Caleb's expression hardened, not with anger, but with clarity. Because now, the truth wasn't something he feared anymore. It was something he could use. And whatever came next would not be about saving anything. It would be about ending it. On his terms. The change didn't announce itself. There was no argument, no breaking point, no visible fracture. Just absence. Vanessa noticed it on a Tuesday morning. Not immediately. Not in a way she could name. But in the way Caleb didn't look at her when she walked into the kitchen. Before, there had always been something in his eyes. Warmth, curiosity, even concern. Now, nothing. He stood by the counter, stirring his coffee with slow, deliberate movements, his expression unreadable. "You're up early," she said, slipping into her usual tone. Light, effortless. "Couldn't sleep," Caleb replied. He didn't look at her. That was new. Vanessa paused for half a second, barely noticeable. But it was there. "You've been saying that a lot," she said, watching him more closely now. Caleb shrugged. "Maybe I mean it." She studied him, expecting something more. A reaction, a flicker, anything. But there was nothing, just stillness. Controlled. It unsettled her. Not enough to alarm her, but enough to register. Because this wasn't the Caleb she knew. This wasn't the man who used to ask questions, who lingered in conversations, who tried to fix things before they broke. This one felt distant. And distance, she understood, but not like this. "You have plans tonight?" she asked casually, opening the fridge. "Yeah." That made her glance up. "Yeah." Caleb took a sip of his coffee. "Dinner. With who?" He finally looked at her, and for a brief second, something cold passed through his gaze. "A client." Vanessa held his eyes, searching, measuring, but his expression didn't shift. "Since when do you do dinners?" she asked. "Since now." Simple, clean, closed. That night, Caleb didn't come home until after midnight. Vanessa was still awake, sitting on the couch with her laptop open, though the screen had long gone idle. "You're late," she said as he walked in. Caleb loosened his tie, setting his keys down without urgency. "I said I would be. You didn't say this late." He glanced at her. "Does it matter?" The question landed softly, but it stayed there. Vanessa closed her laptop slowly. "That depends," she said. "Should it?" Caleb considered her for a moment, then shook his head. "No," he said, "it shouldn't." He walked past her. No explanation, no elaboration, just distance. Vanessa watched him disappear into the bedroom, her expression tightening just slightly. Something wasn't aligning. Not yet, but soon. Days passed, and the shift became clearer. Caleb stopped asking where she was going. Stopped checking when she came home. Stopped noticing the little inconsistencies she had once been careful to hide. Not because he didn't see them, but because he no longer needed to react. "You don't care anymore?" Vanessa asked one evening, leaning against the doorway as Caleb worked on his laptop. He didn't look up. About what? About me. That made him pause. Just briefly. Then he closed his laptop slowly, lifting his gaze to meet hers. I think I care exactly the right amount, he said. Vanessa frowned. And what does that mean? Caleb studied her, really studied her, like he was seeing something clearly now that he hadn't before. It means I'm not confused anymore. Silence. Vanessa crossed her arms. You're being vague. I'm being honest. That's not the same thing. Caleb tilted his head slightly. No, he agreed. It's not. The tension lingered, unresolved, but not explosive. And that was what bothered her most, because she knew how to handle emotion. She knew how to navigate anger, deflect accusations, control narratives. But this quiet withdrawal, it gave her nothing to work with. Still, she underestimated it. You're overthinking everything, she said one night, watching him scroll through his phone, detached. Caleb didn't look up. Maybe. You always do this, she continued. You build things up in your head until they feel bigger than they are. He finally glanced at her. And you always do the opposite. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Which is? Act like nothing matters. The words hung between them, sharp, precise. Vanessa's expression hardened slightly. That's not fair. Caleb nodded. Probably not. But he didn't take it back. Later that night, Vanessa stood alone in front of the mirror, brushing her hair slowly. Her reflection stared back at her, composed, confident, in control. But something felt off. Not wrong, just different. Caleb hadn't touched her in days, hadn't reached for her, hadn't even looked at her the way he used to. And yet, he wasn't angry, wasn't accusing, wasn't even trying. That was the part she didn't understand. Because in her mind, Caleb was predictable, emotional, loyal to a fault, the kind of man who stayed, who forgave, who waited. But now, he felt unreachable. The next evening, Vanessa came home earlier than usual, intentionally, testing something. Caleb was already there, sitting on the balcony, a glass of whiskey in his hand, the city stretching endlessly in front of him. You're home, she said. He nodded. So are you. Vanessa stepped outside, the cool night air brushing against her skin. I thought you had dinner. Cancelled. Why? Caleb took a slow sip. Didn't feel like going. She watched him carefully. You've been canceling a lot lately. He shrugged. Priorities change. Another simple answer. Another closed door. Vanessa leaned against the railing, closer now. You've changed, she said quietly. Caleb didn't deny it. Yeah. That was all. No explanation. No apology. Just acknowledgement. Is this about the 5 days? She asked. Finally. There it was. Caleb turned his head slightly, looking at her. For a moment, it felt like something real might surface. But then, he looked away. It's about more than that. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Then say it. Caleb exhaled slowly. No. That word again. No anger. No hesitation. Just refusal. Vanessa felt something shift in her chest. Not panic. Not yet. But something close. Because for the first time, she wasn't controlling the conversation. She wasn't even part of it. You're shutting me out, she said. Caleb considered that. Then nodded. Yeah. Her breath caught slightly. Why? He looked at her again. And this time, his eyes were clear, cold, certain. Because I finally understand where I stand. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Vanessa held his gaze, searching for something to push against. But there was nothing, no weakness, no hesitation, no emotion she could use. And still, she smiled. Faint. Confident. Because in her mind, this was temporary. A phase. A reaction. He would come back. He always did. Don't overdo it, she said lightly. You're not as distant as you think. Caleb didn't respond. Just took another sip of his drink, watching the city, not her. Vanessa turned and walked back inside, her heels soft against the floor. Unbothered, unshaken, certain. But behind her, Caleb remained still, silent, watching the reflection of the city in the glass. Because the truth was, this wasn't distance. Not really. It was something else. Something final. He wasn't pulling away to be noticed. He wasn't withdrawing to provoke a reaction. He wasn't waiting for her to fix anything. He was already gone. Vanessa just hadn't realized it yet. It happened on a Sunday. No raised voices. No shattered glass. No dramatic buildup. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before something irreversible. Vanessa was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone, a half-finished cup of coffee sitting untouched beside her. Sunlight poured in through the glass windows, soft and indifferent, illuminating a space that still looked like a perfect life. Caleb stood in the doorway for a moment before she noticed him. "You're staring," she said without looking up. "I know." That made her pause. She lifted her eyes slowly. Something in his voice, different, flat, final. "What?" she asked. Caleb stepped inside, closing the distance between them with calm, measured steps. "We need to talk." Vanessa leaned back slightly against the counter, studying him. "You've been saying that for days. And now I mean it." A flicker of something crossed her face. Still, controlled. But sharper. "Okay," she said. "Talk." Caleb didn't sit, didn't lean. He remained standing, grounded, like he had already decided how this would end. "I know where you were," he said. Vanessa didn't react immediately, but her fingers stilled on her phone. A detail, small, but real. Caleb noticed. "I know about the club," he continued. "The car, the building on the Upper East Side." Silence. Vanessa's eyes held his now. No denial, no interruption, just calculation. "And I know about Julian Cross." That was the moment, barely visible, but undeniable. Her breath shifted, just slightly. Caleb exhaled slowly. "There it is," he said quietly. Vanessa straightened, setting her phone down with deliberate care. "You've been busy." Her tone was calm. Too calm. But the edge was there now. Sharp. Defensive. "I had time." Caleb replied. "And you used it to spy on me." "I used it to understand what you refused to explain." Vanessa let out a soft laugh. Unimpressed. "So you followed me, dug into my life, built a story, and now you think you have the truth." Caleb shook his head slowly. "I don't think," he said. "I know." The words landed heavier than anything he had said before, because there was no emotion behind them. No anger, no accusation, just certainty. Vanessa crossed her arms. "Then go ahead," she said. "Tell me what you think you know." Caleb met her gaze, and for a moment there was silence. Because this was the point of no return. Once spoken, nothing could be taken back. "You didn't disappear for 5 days," he said. "You went somewhere you've been going for a long time." Vanessa's expression didn't change, but her stillness deepened. "You have a second life," Caleb continued. "With him." Still, no interruption. "So he went further. You didn't just cheat," he said. "You replaced me." That was the line, the one that landed. Vanessa's jaw tightened slightly. "Don't dramatize it," she said. Caleb almost smiled. "See, that's the problem," he replied. "You still think this is about drama." He took a step closer. Not aggressively, just enough to make the space between them undeniable. "This isn't about where you went for 5 days," he said. "It's about the fact that you had somewhere else to go." Vanessa held his gaze, unflinching. "And," she said. The word was quiet, but it carried weight, challenge, defiance. Caleb nodded slowly. "And I didn't matter enough for you to even hide it properly anymore." That hit. Not loudly, but precisely. Vanessa exhaled through her nose, her composure tightening like a thread pulled too far. "You're making assumptions. I watched you get out of his car." A pause. Brief, sharp, but real. "And what exactly did you see?" she asked. Caleb didn't hesitate. "I saw how you looked when you thought no one was watching." Silence. Vanessa's eyes flickered, just for a second. "And that was enough." "You looked real," Caleb said. The words were quiet, but they cut deeper than accusation. "More real than you've looked with me in a long time." Something shifted in her then. Not guilt, not regret. Something more complicated. "That doesn't mean what you think it means," she said. Caleb tilted his head slightly. "Then explain it." Vanessa hesitated, and that hesitation spoke louder than anything else. "I don't owe you every part of my life," she said finally. There it was again, that same line, that same shield. Caleb nodded. "You're right," he said. Vanessa blinked. Unexpected.
But you owed me honesty, he added. And you didn't even try.
Silence filled the room, heavy, unavoidable.
Vanessa looked away for the first time, not completely, just enough. I didn't want to deal with this, she said. Caleb's voice stayed calm. You mean me? Her jaw tightened. I mean the questions, the expectations, the weight of it. Caleb let that sit, then asked quietly, so you found something easier? Vanessa didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either.
That's what he is, isn't he? Caleb continued, easy. Vanessa's eyes snapped back to his. You don't know anything about him. I don't need to, Caleb replied. I know what he represents. And what's that? Caleb held her gaze. An escape. The word lingered, because it was true, and they both knew it. Vanessa exhaled slowly, running a hand through her hair. You're simplifying things. No, Caleb said. I'm finally seeing them clearly. Another silence. But this one felt different. Heavier. Closer to something breaking. You think this is all on me? Vanessa asked suddenly, her voice sharper now. Caleb didn't react. I think you made your choices, he said. And you didn't. She pushed. You think you were perfect in this marriage? Caleb nodded once. No, he said. I wasn't. That caught her off guard. A crack. Small, but visible. But I stayed, he continued. I showed up, even when it wasn't easy. His voice didn't rise, didn't shake, and that made it worse. You checked out long before I did, Vanessa said. Caleb shook his head. No, he replied quietly. I just didn't leave. That was the moment, the real one, because Vanessa didn't have an answer for that. Silence stretched between them. Long, uncomfortable, honest. For the first time, Vanessa didn't look in control. Not completely. There was something else now. Something uncertain. Something exposed. But it didn't last, because pride was stronger. She straightened slightly, her expression settling back into something colder. So what now? She asked. Caleb looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, he didn't see his wife. Just someone he used to love. Now, he repeated. Vanessa crossed her arms again. Yes, now that you know everything, what do you want? Caleb didn't answer right away, because the truth was, he already knew. I don't want anything from you, he said finally. The words were quiet, but absolute, and that was what broke something in her. Not visibly, not completely, but enough. Vanessa frowned. What does that mean? Caleb held her gaze. It means I'm done trying. Silence. Final. Unavoidable. Vanessa's lips parted slightly, like she was about to say something. To argue. To reclaim control. But nothing came out, because for the first time, she didn't know how. Caleb turned away slowly, walking toward the living room. Not in anger, not in defeat, but with something far more dangerous, clarity. Behind him, Vanessa stood still, alone in the space she had always controlled. And for the first time, it didn't feel like control anymore. The silence didn't fade, it settled, heavy, lingering, permanent. Vanessa didn't follow him right away. She stayed in the kitchen long after Caleb walked out, her hands resting against the cold marble counter, her reflection faintly visible in the darkened window. For the first time in a long time, she didn't know what to say, and worse, she didn't know if it would matter. Caleb sat in the living room, the city stretching endlessly beyond the glass. The skyline shimmered, distant and indifferent, like everything else that used to feel important. He didn't turn on the lights, didn't reach for his phone, didn't move. He just sat there. Still, Vanessa finally stepped into the room. You're just going to walk away? She asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it wasn't soft either. It carried something new, urgency. Caleb didn't look at her. I'm not walking away, he said calmly. I'm just not chasing anymore. The words landed differently this time, because there was no anger behind them, no pain, just truth. Vanessa crossed her arms, standing a few feet behind him. You think this makes you better, she said, acting like you don't care? Caleb let out a quiet breath. This has nothing to do with being better. Then what is it? She pressed. He turned his head slightly, just enough to acknowledge her presence. It's about being done. That word again. Done. It echoed in the space between them like something final. Vanessa's jaw tightened. You don't get to decide that alone. Caleb almost smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I already did. That was when something cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. Vanessa stepped closer. You're acting like I destroyed everything, she said, her voice sharper now. Like this is all on me. Caleb didn't respond immediately, and that silence, unsettled her more than anything else. Say something, she demanded. Caleb finally turned to face her fully, and when he did, his expression was calm. Too calm. You want me to argue? He asked. Yell. Blame you. Is that what you need? Vanessa hesitated. Because yes, that was what she understood. That was what she could control. This isn't a game, Caleb, she said. No, he agreed. It's not. Then stop treating it like you've already won something. Caleb tilted his head slightly. Won? There was a faint trace of something in his voice now. Not anger. Something colder. I didn't win anything, he said. I just stopped losing. The words hit harder than anything before. Because they weren't emotional, they were precise. Vanessa exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. You're twisting this, she said. You're making it sound like I just replaced you overnight. Caleb didn't react. Because that wasn't the part that mattered anymore. It wasn't like that, she continued, her voice lowering now, less controlled. It didn't just happen. Caleb watched her, silent, observing, waiting, and for the first time, Vanessa filled the silence. I didn't plan it, she said. Okay. I didn't wake up one day and decide to have some second life. Her voice wasn't defensive now, not entirely. There was something else beneath it. Something closer to truth. It just happened, she added. Caleb nodded slowly. Things don't just happen, Vanessa. They do, she insisted. When something's missing. There it was. The justification. The shift. Caleb studied her, and something was missing. Vanessa held his gaze. Yes. The word came out quieter than she intended, but it stayed. Caleb absorbed it. Not with hurt, not with anger, but with understanding. Cold, clear understanding. And you couldn't tell me that, he asked. Vanessa's expression tightened. You wouldn't have understood. Caleb let out a faint, humorless breath. You didn't even try. Silence again. But this time, it pressed differently. Vanessa looked away briefly, then back at him. You want the truth, she said. Caleb didn't answer, but his stillness gave her permission. He didn't ask anything from me, she said. Caleb's eyes didn't move. He didn't expect me to be anything, she continued. Didn't need explanations. Didn't question me. Didn't depend on me. Each word landed slowly, carefully, like something she had been holding back for a long time. Caleb nodded once. So he made things easy. Vanessa hesitated. Then, yes. The honesty hung in the air between them. Raw, unfiltered. Too late. And I didn't, Caleb said. It wasn't a question. Vanessa didn't answer. Because she didn't need to. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then asked quietly, do you love him? That was the question. The real one. Vanessa's breath caught. Just slightly. But Caleb saw it. She started. Then stopped. Because for the first time, she didn't have a clean answer. I don't know, she said finally. And that was the truth. Caleb nodded slowly. Of course you don't. Vanessa frowned. What does that mean? Caleb's gaze didn't soften. It means this was never about love. The words settled heavily. Because deep down, she knew he was right. This isn't that simple, she said, though her voice had lost some of its edge. It is, Caleb replied. You wanted something easier, so you took it. Vanessa shook her head. You're reducing everything. No, he said. I'm removing the excuses. That was the moment, the breaking point, because Vanessa realized something then, something she hadn't expected. He wasn't fighting for her. He wasn't trying to win her back. He wasn't even asking her to choose. He was already gone. You're really just done? She asked. The question came out softer now, less certain. Caleb looked at her, and for the first time, there was something in his eyes. Not love, not anger, something quieter, sadness, but not the kind that holds on, the kind that lets go. Yeah, he said. Vanessa's lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something else, something that might pull him back. But nothing came, because for the first time, she didn't know how. And for the first time, it mattered. Caleb turned away again, his gaze returning to the city. Unmoving, unreachable. Behind him, Vanessa stood still, not in control, not certain, not untouched, just standing in the aftermath of something she thought she could manage, but couldn't. Because the truth was, she hadn't lost him in that moment. She had lost him long before. She just hadn't realized it, until now. The morning felt different. Not quieter, not heavier, just clear. Caleb woke before the sun had fully risen. For a moment, he lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint rhythm of Vanessa's breathing beside him. It was familiar, too familiar. And yet, it no longer felt like home. He turned his head slightly. Vanessa was still asleep, her face softened in rest, untouched by the sharp edges of the night before. In sleep, she looked like someone he used to know, someone he used to love without hesitation. But that version of her felt distant now, like a memory he could see clearly, but no longer reach. Caleb sat up slowly, careful not to wake her. There was no urgency in his movements, no hesitation either, just quiet intention. He didn't pack much. A suitcase, a few shirts, essentials. The rest, he left behind. Because none of it mattered anymore. Not the apartment, not the furniture, not the life they had built together piece by piece. What mattered was that he walked away with himself intact. By the time Vanessa woke, the bed beside her was empty. At first, she didn't think anything of it. Caleb had been distant lately, restless, up early. It wasn't unusual. "Caleb?" She called out, her voice still thick with sleep. No answer. She sat up, glancing toward the bathroom. Empty. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Something in her chest tightened, just slightly. She got out of bed, pulling on a robe as she stepped into the hallway. Caleb. Still nothing. The living room came into view, and that's when she saw it. The space. Subtle, but unmistakable. The absence. His jacket was gone. His shoes. The watch he always left by the counter. Gone. Vanessa stopped walking. Her breath caught, not fully, not sharply, but enough. "No," she murmured. It didn't sound like panic. Not yet. More like disbelief. She moved quickly now, scanning the apartment. The closet, half empty. The bathroom. His toothbrush gone. Her pulse began to rise. Not dramatically, but steadily. Then she saw it, on the counter, a single envelope. Vanessa walked toward it slowly, each step heavier than the last. She picked it up, her name written on the front, in his handwriting. For a moment, she just stared at it, as if not opening it might somehow delay whatever came next. But then, she unfolded it. The message was short, clean, like everything Caleb had become. "Vanessa, I'm not leaving because of what you did. I'm leaving because of what I allowed. Somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing myself in this marriage. And instead of facing it, I stayed. I adjusted. I accepted things I shouldn't have. That's on me, but I won't do it anymore. You didn't lose me today. You lost me gradually, every time I chose to stay silent when I should have spoken. This isn't revenge. And it's not anger. It's clarity. Take care of yourself. Caleb." Vanessa read it twice, then a third time, each word settling deeper, heavier. No accusations, no blame, no pleading, just absence. Her fingers tightened slightly around the paper. Her mind searched for something, anger, justification, dismissal, anything that would give her ground to stand on. But there was nothing, because he hadn't attacked her. He hadn't even asked her to understand. He had simply left. Vanessa let out a slow breath, setting the letter down carefully. Too carefully. "This is ridiculous," she said under her breath, but her voice didn't carry conviction. She reached for her phone, dialed his number. It rang. Once. Twice. Then, voicemail. She hung up immediately. Tried again. Voicemail. Vanessa frowned, pacing slightly now. "This is just a reaction," she muttered. "He'll come back. He always did." Didn't he? She stopped moving. The thought lingered longer than it should have, because suddenly, she wasn't sure anymore. The apartment felt different now. Not empty, but hollow. Vanessa walked toward the balcony, pushing the glass door open, the city air rushing in. The skyline stretched endlessly before her, exactly the same as yesterday, exactly the same as every day. But something had shifted. Irreversibly, she leaned against the railing, her grip tightening slightly. "He'll call," she said quietly, to herself, not as a belief, as a hope. But the silence answered her instead. Hours passed, then evening. No calls, no messages, no sign of him.
Vanessa sat on the couch, the letter still resting on the table in front of her. Unread now, but unforgettable.
Her phone lit up. For a second, her breath caught, but it wasn't him. Just a notification. Work. Life continuing.
Vanessa stared at the screen, then locked it, setting it down slowly.
The truth crept in then, not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly, like everything else that mattered. He wasn't coming back, and for the first time, she understood something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. Control had always been her strength, her advantage, her shield. But control only worked when the other person stayed, and Caleb had left. Not in anger, not in weakness, but in something she had never prepared for. Certainty.
Vanessa looked around the apartment. The same walls, the same view, the same life.
But now, it felt unfamiliar, because the one person who had made it real was gone. And all that remained was the echo of something she had taken for granted, until it no longer existed.
Vanessa closed her eyes briefly, not crying, not breaking.
Just still. Because sometimes, the hardest consequences aren't loud. They don't shatter. They don't explode. They settle, quietly, permanently, and leave you alone with everything you thought you could control, but never truly did.